So thank you very much, Leah. Thank you, Susan, for offering to give this talk tonight. With that, I'll turn it over to Susan and Leah. Thank you.
Thanks. All right, thank you, Roger, for that wonderful introduction. So welcome to the presentation, Beyond RGB, Achieving Color Accuracy Using Practical Imaging Methods. I'm very excited to present our ongoing research with all of you and everyone online as well. Before we go into the presentation regarding the research, I wanted to share a little bit about the Munsell Color Science Lab for anyone who might not be as familiar. So this lab was established in 1983 through a donation from the Munsell Color Foundation, and our first director was Frank Grum, who this classroom where it's being presented at is named after. And Frank Grum's work was very extensive, and some of the major highlights of his work included international standards regarding color, but he also established the curriculum of the graduate program here. So it's very important to recognize his contributions to both color science as well as the Munsell Color Science Lab. For some of the work that the students do here and that we do here, it ranges in a variety of topics. Up here, I have a series of images regarding a Monet, and we have a lab here dedicated to cultural heritage and investigating color related to that. So one of the things is this particular image shows this really beautiful sun setting on this blue sky background. And we might think that what this should look like in black and white is this far right image, but in reality, it's actually this middle image. And Monet is really playing with his use of colors and the value of those colors in order to create this really striking image of the sun. One of the other things that we have here is we have a light room that's dedicated to full adaptation and immersion. And so that's something that students can explore here. We also have students who are very interested in exploring virtual reality and extended reality. So we have research projects on that. And then we also have, this is a group picture of a bunch of us students underneath a sodium lamp where, of course, color seems to go away under this very narrow band of light. So that's a bit about the types of projects that are being researched here by students. All right, so now let's go into the presentation itself. So things to ponder. And these questions, I think, are very integral into both the topic of what we're of this talk, but also the specifics of the research. So thinking about how do we define color? How does color happen? Where does color happen? And why do things look colorful? So these four key questions are very integral into the heart of this research. So on this slide is an example of this. And we have these alternating blue and yellow stripes. And we also have these two pink mini columns. And actually, both of these pink areas are the same RGB values. But because of where they are positioned within these alternating stripes, they could actually appear different. So color can change in our perception based on what's around those colors. And this is also portrayed extremely well by the artist Joseph Albers in this painting, The X-Illusion, where we can see he's drawn these X's and he's actually connected them here at the bottom to for sure tell you that they are actually the same color, but because of the fields that they're on, it has played with our perception with them. So these are illustrating some very important topics regarding understanding color and where is it coming from. And this goes into one of the main principles that we have, which is the color triangle. So this is the general foundation of understanding color. So here we have a light source. We have an item to look at, and then we have a sensor, our eyes. And this is how we establish color. You can't have color without light. You can't have color without something in order to see it, because we need a sensor. Color exists really with only in our minds. It is a perception. And There's a wonderful painting by Vermeer, a woman holding a balance, that actually illustrates this really beautifully within classical art. So here we have light coming in from the window, the sunlight. We have her eyes as the sensor. And then here down at the bottom, we have the object that she's looking at, which is this scale balance. And I think it's pretty wonderful to actually see the color triangle being represented really elegantly through art. And speaking of art, we have this fantastic example by Monet of his series of paintings of the Rouen Cathedral. So he created this series of paintings at different times of day with different atmospheric conditions of the appearance of the cathedral. So the natural light is actually changing the way, the color of the building and how it appears to the human eye. And this is something that is pretty critical, that even daylight, as we think about it, is not just constant all the time. Even our circumstances are changing and change the appearance of items around us. And as we think about how we see, so this might be just a brief review, but for anyone watching online who might be new to the subject, we see within the visible light spectrum defined by our own human vision, which is a very narrow band within the electromagnetic spectrum, about 300 nanometers, maybe around 400 to about 700 nanometers. And then, of course, depending on the light source that we use, that can also affect how we view an item. So just like Monet's Rouen cathedrals that appear different colors throughout different times of day, if we change our light source as well, this can also change the appearance of an item. And I think well, we're very familiar with the tungsten halogen lamps with this very strong intensity in the longer wavelengths, which make things appear, maybe we would say, warmer to us on our eyes. Here on the opposite end, in a way, we have this LED, blue pump LED light, which has a bit of a missing area for those longer wavelengths. So it might appear a bit cooler to us. We might use this type of language. And then, of course, we have filtered daylight, which is a bit more even than the other two. And then light, of course, is interacting with matter, and it does this through a variety of ways. It can be absorbed, it could be emitted, transmitted, reflection, as well as refraction. And emission, we might think of, for natural sources, you might think of a lightning bug, or those animals that live deep, deep under the sea, and there's no light coming down to them, but they are using chemical ways to create light. So emission is also a natural way in order to create light interacting with matter. But the one particular one we're going to focus on today is reflection. So light coming from an outside source, interacting with the surface of matter, and then reflecting back in. And that's the one we're focusing on in this particular talk. So a nice example of this is shown here, and this is a type of paint. And here we have the reflectance spectra. And so reflectance is the way in which the light interacts with that material, and it can be a type of signature for different materials. Some materials might be very similar with their reflectance spectra, but some of them can differ quite a bit. So understanding all of these key things, we have the triangle, we have light, we have the ways in which light can interact with matter, and that really brings us to the heart of the challenge. When we take a photograph of pieces of art, pieces of cultural heritage that are very important to us and to human history, lots of different outcomes can happen. And if I were to ask and put out the question, which of these paintings is the number one painting that's the most accurate of this Vermeer, the one that you would save for all of human history to learn from, which one would it be? These are all, great photographs. Also, as we also think about the way in which research has expanded digitally as well, digital documentation is becoming increasingly critical. If I were to pick perhaps this one or this one, these paintings are a bit more high contrast, they've got a bit more shadows in them, and maybe if those were the only areas of documentation I saw of this painting, I might, as a researcher, be writing about Vermeer as somebody who was very into shadows and these very dramatic things. But if it's actually this one, sorry, I have a bit of delay, but the third one to the right, this one right here, I might say Vermeer is very colorful. And it's going to change the way that I learn about and that I write about these pieces. And so digital documentation, especially now, has become increasingly critical. So we can see that the real challenge here of documenting these items well. So going back again to the color triangle, we have light source, an object, and the sensor, our eyes. But if we swap them out for, instead of the sun, a light bulb, instead of our eyes, a camera, we start to see the color triangle a little bit differently. So one of the things that we do know about this is that cameras are not the same as our eyes. So sensitivities of cameras, they're similar to our eyes in the sense that traditionally they have had 3 channels, but they are not the same as the sensitivities to our eyes. And this can pose problems that when we're documenting materials, particularly for areas such like blue paint. Sometimes blue paint can, to our eyes, still appears blue, but to a camera, it can start to shift a little bit in the way that it appears. So it can be very challenging within cultural heritage to actually document the way that the item appears to a human. So it's very important to do this. This is an example of the traditional documentation workflow. Or the imaging workflow. So here we have a camera, we have a white light, we have our object, the painting, a child's rendition of Starry Night, and the output of this is a 3-channel output. And so, as I mentioned before, the sensitivities of cameras are not our eyes. And even though there are ways of trying to make them a bit more like our eyes, we do know that there are still materials that if both of them are in the scene, it really can only capture one of them correctly and the other one will be skewed. So that tends to lend to post-processing, which can be subjective to the post-processor, as well as like other complications. But we also know that there is a technology that does mimic the way that our eyes see objects really, really well. And this is through multispectral imaging. Multispectral imaging is a really fantastic technology to do this. However, traditionally, for small to mid-sized cultural heritage institutions, they're very expensive. They also require, or they tend to require extra training. So they specialized training that you need to have come in. And generally, they are mostly used for material analysis. So using them for accurate documentation might not always be the goal for these instruments. But there is a way that we can turn our traditional RGB camera into a type of spectral camera. And this is done by using the dual light method or the dual RGB method. And this method was pioneered by Roy Burns, who was a professor here at the Munsell Color Science Lab. So we do this by taking 2 different images of the same scene under 2 different lighting conditions. And we get 6 channels instead of just 3 channels. So I've represented both of these lighting conditions as yellow and blue. They're not actually yellow and blue lights, it's just to differentiate them. But this is a way in which you can do this, and you can use programming in order to combine these and create your color accurate image. And this was a really incredible breakthrough because you're able to get not just colorimetric information, but you can also get spectral information or estimation out of this. But one of the things that was also another challenge was how do we make this feasible and usable for cultural heritage institutions? Not everybody has a programming background or access to licensing software in order to perform these operations. So this brings us into the context for Beyond RGB, the software program that that Olivia Cusio, my predecessor, worked on creating. So for context, it's for cultural heritage institutions, particularly small to mid-sized ones, to harness the power of spectral imaging. And the goal is to create that really accurate color reproduction that you can share with researchers that they can learn from. You get very good documentation of your items, and it's utilizing equipment that they already have within their spaces, or something that's easy or reasonably easy for them to obtain. So instead of trying to do a fundraiser in order to purchase an entire multispectral system, what can they already harness and use that they have within their reach? So this is something that's incredibly important, especially for there's many, many, many small and mid-sized institutions. So this is an overview of the software in a graphic. So here we have your RGB camera. We have our two lighting sources, and we take images of each of these things under both lighting sources. So here we have an image of our flat field, and this is in order to count for non-uniformity of the lighting within the scene. We have an image of the dark current, an image of our color target, which is the ground truth that we're basing our transformations off of. And then, of course, we have an image of the art piece itself. And then the output of that becomes our color accurate master file. Okay, so the output, beyond just the color accurate master file, you also are able to obtain spectral information as well as colorimetric information. So this is an example of the spectral estimation that can come out of it. So here with because you get a cube basically of the data. So here you're able to use the information that we've obtained from the 6 channels and get an estimate of the reflectance from different areas of the image that you have. And then, of course, here we have the colorimetric information from the ground truth from our known measured target. And so considering that the target provides the ground truth data, this is also leads us into the topic of how important it is to have a target that actually reflects or is appropriate for the items that you're imaging, because this is where your target really does become critical. And one of the things from the calibration that we are able to obtain is we get delta E, a color difference of delta E 2000 for each of the different patches within our color target, as well as a mean delta E 2000 for the entire target as a whole. So this is a short overview of the entire system and the process. And it's also very similar to scene referred imaging. So for those who might not be as familiar with C-Lab color space, this is a brief overview of understanding what these color differences are. So C-Lab is a way in which to map and measure the differences between colors. So it's determined by 3 different axes. We have the Z-axis, which is lightness, which goes from dark to white, or black to white, I should say. We have the X-axis, which is red to green, and then we have the Y-axis, which is blueness and yellowness. So it's very important to understand, like, where are we within this space when we map a color. And every color has one of these attributes, and this is shown here. So here, if we take this little example of various colors, we can break them into these 3 component parts of lightness and chromaticness. So here they're shown their lightness. Here we have their redness, greenness for each of them. And then here we show their yellowness, blueness for each of them. So this is one of the ways that we can talk about where these colors are placed within C-Labs. Additionally, because it's a globe, we can also talk about other coordinates within C-Lab, which become very important. One such as hue, which is where we are within this space. So it's around the circle. So it's the angle that you're at, and as well as chroma. So it tells us the distance away from the middle achromatic Z-axis. And so these become really important if we ask, where is this color and how might it have changed? Such as if you have a painting and you put it in front of a window and it's faded, now you bring it back again, but you've measured it before and after. If you've taken a picture with Beyond RGB before and after, you can see where the same area on the painting might have moved, where the color has changed and shifted. And so mapping it within C-Lab space becomes very important. All right, now we'll get into the software. And this software could not have been made possible without the Rochester Institute of Technology undergraduate software engineering students. These are seniors who have chosen this project and worked on it to make it happen. And I want to emphasize all of their hard work because Olivia started this with a goal of creating a free open source software that could be customizable, and it really could not have happened without all of these amazing software engineers' work. So it started with the first team Better Than Really Good Bread, who created the initial launch of it, and they made it work. So they learned a lot of color science very quickly within 1 year to create the program. And then the other teams, I've had the privilege of working with Team Randomly Generated Burgers and then Team Heuristic Heroes, and working with them on improvements to the software. And then the current team, who have yet to decide a name, Sahara Smith, who is she's another student here. She is working with them. But these are the people who have created the software and make it happen. So I want to make sure to emphasize them and their hard work on this because I am not a computer software engineer to make it happen. Okay, so let me turn off my, and now we're going to watch a brief overview of the software in action. So here, this is the software. This is a slightly older version, but we have an updated version. So this is just loading in the images that we want to run through the software. This part is now picking the output file, so where we want everything to go to. So particularly here, we have an auto sort feature, which is very nice. So if you label everything nicely, it'll go into these two different columns, one column for each of the different lighting conditions. And then here we have object, target, flat field, and dark current. We also now in the updated versions, or in the current version, we have a batch process. So you choose your color target, your flat fields, and your dark currents, and then it pairs up all of your objects. And then now we will go to the next part, which is our ground truth. So choosing our color target. We have preloaded a few different types of targets into the software, but you can also put in a custom color target. This is the grid that's choosing the region where it will extract the pixels from your color target from the images. And we have to choose which one is white because we have to tell it where white is. And then this is running and loading and processing all of these images now. So all 8 images are going through the software currently, and it's calibrating, and it does it under less than a minute for this process. And this is the output. So here we have the color accurate master file, and this is doing the spectral estimation. So here we have, I'm going to pause it right here. So here we have what looks to be just one blue pigment all over this painting. But actually in investigation, by looking at the visible reflectance, we can actually see that there are 2 different distinct blue pigments. And this is something that's really important. And this is critical for small to mid-sized institutions, being able to investigate local artists, understand the materials that they use. This is an incredibly helpful tool. And then from this part, we can go to the calibration report, and this tells us how well the calibration performed. So I'm just going to pause it right here very quickly to show you. So it looks all green right now, and that's because there is a threshold, a color difference threshold that all of these are scaled to. So it's a stoplight scaling. So green meaning you're good, you're very good for the threshold. If you get towards orange or red, you're getting really close or you've gone beyond the threshold it's set to, which it's right now it's scaled at around FADGI. It's the FADGI standards for cultural heritage documentation. So each of the individual boxes, yep, okay, you can see this. Each individual box tells you the color difference 2000 between the measured and your image target, that particular patch. And then we also up here in the corner have a mean delta E for the entire target as a whole. One of the other features that we put in here is the use of a grayscale. Just in case you had somebody who had some type of color anomalous vision, it was important to include a grayscale as well. Can help you see differences a little bit quicker. And I think that is the end of the demo. Yeah, we go back to here. So that's an overview of the entire software. So the major strokes of how the software works. What we also have with the software is a companion website. And this website has workflows, demos where you can download the software for free, as well as sets of images in order to explore it further. We also have frequently asked questions and lots of great stuff is on the software now, which is really wonderful. And with this QR code that's here, you can access the website and the software, of course, as well. Okay, so we have this amazing dual light imaging. We have this software and we've put them together, and now what has been the impact? And this is really critical for us. So we have been really privileged to test and use this software at some amazing institutions around the world now. And we've gotten their feedback on it, particularly for improvements. We could not do this research without the investment of the cultural heritage community. So in the past few years, Beyond RGB has reached even more places. It's gone overseas through presentations, as well as through museum professionals who are just very curious about this. They want a way in order to document their items more accurately, in order to get the most out of their imaging workflows, which this works with. And they've been very excited about where this free and open source software for them can be utilized. So two of the places close to home, one has been our Cary Graphic Arts collection here at RIT. So we've been able to investigate some items from the Renaissance with them on this. And then we've also gone a bit west over to Buffalo State to their conservation program and introduced the conservation students to this really powerful imaging and software tools. We've also gone to Carlisle, Pennsylvania, to the U.S. Army Heritage and Education Center to image a bunch of textiles, which tend to be very difficult for them to get color accurate. And this was really exciting for them, especially since it was like having a dedicated imaging workflow to investigate their items was very important to them. It's also gone to the National Cryptologic Museum to see some items that were recovered from U-boats, so a U-boat code book, as well as MoMA to look at some really amazing paintings as well. And it's gone as well to Michigan State University. This was another exhibition that we did with them to look at items from their rare book collection, so things that were color critical for them to display to researchers. Okay, so we've taken this on the road. People have been very excited and investigated, and I think one of the next big questions is, how well does it actually do? Like, where's the proof of all of this? And this is an item from the U.S. Army Heritage and Education Center. So this is a flag that they had. And we measured with a spectrophotometer these three different areas 1, 2, and 3. And we compared the measurements to the images as well. So here we have the color difference of the measured values versus what was imaged. And one of the major ones is this number 1 area on this blue field from the flag. The color difference between the measured area and the traditional imaging is about a 7, which is a bit beyond the acceptability for cultural heritage items for this particular type of item. So that's not great if you're trying to communicate what the actual colors of these items looked like. Like, the past didn't look black and white and faded. It's actually very vibrant and it's very colorful. And so it's very important for them to communicate that to researchers. It depends on the type of object, and it depends on the type of object, like the collection it's in, as also with the material. But 7 is a bit high, generally speaking. We want it more around like 4, 5. Ideally, we want it around 2 or less. But 7 is a distinct difference. You'll notice it, yeah, between your imaging documentation and the item itself. And yeah, here we can see beyond RGB, that blue field in the background is down to a 3.2, and that's much more in that acceptability range for documentation. Here's another item that was looked at, and this is a historic photograph. And here we can see this graduation from 3, 2, and 1 all the way up the side. And here we can see particularly, if I could actually, I'll turn on my laser pointer on again. So the number 1 area actually has slightly higher difference, but here we can see beyond RGB is actually improving upon that. And that becomes really important and actually very critical for historic photographs, where subtleties between photographs and the prints that are within collections become really important for like the curators or the researchers as well. Here again, we have our child's rendition of Starry Night, which is one of our most beloved paintings within the lab that we've imaged a lot. But it's a fantastic example of what this research can do. So here we have the 2 different blue pigments, areas 1 and area 2. And this is one of those examples where traditional imaging, only one of the blues will come out the way we see it, and the other one comes out purple, and it's distinctly different. So if we were documenting this item, we might think like, oh no, I might have the wrong painting, and put it back again because it appears different in the documentation. So obviously you have other types of documentation like catalog numbers, but you want to make sure your imaging documentation is as good as you can get it. So Beyond RGB really does improve greatly that specific area. So here we can see Beyond RGB, the color difference is 1.6. Traditional imaging, it's 16.5, and that's nowhere close to what we're seeing when we look at an item. One of the wonderful applications that I've been able to explore with this is conservation documentation of an item, such as before and after a cleaning treatment. This is something that's important for conservators to document. So here we have the spine of a book that's being shown. This book is covered in vellum, which is a type of animal skin prepared in a specific way. And it was very dirty on the spine. So it got cleaned, and it was documented with Beyond RGB both times. And what I'm showing here in this reflectance graph, the solid lines are the spectrophotometer measured areas, and the dashed lines are the Beyond RGB estimated reflectance. And what's wonderful about this is that it is showing the differences between the before and the after, because this item has drastically changed in appearance, and it's important to document how drastically it has actually changed. And this estimated reflectance becomes a really useful tool to show that and to make sure it's actually quantifiably documented. So future directions for this research. One of our amazing third year PhD students, Sahara Smith, she's looking into filters in a way to lower the cost of performing this dual light imaging. Currently, we're using tunable LEDs, which are going down in price a bit as demand gets larger. However, they're still a bit expensive. So she's investigating filters, and my particular investigation is with mobile phones because it's a powerful imaging tool that is in many different areas around the world that's easily accessible generally. So I'm investigating to see how well they perform within this type of documentation, so we could get very good, accurate documentation with estimated spectra as well from using mobile phones with this. So I'd like to give credit again to Olivia Cuzio, whose research was creating the Beyond RGB software with this, and the teams of software engineers who have done all the updates and really done deep dives into learning the code and crash courses in color science. And if you're interested in learning more, please scan the QR code to download the software, or reach out to any of us. I'm at the top, Sahara Smith, who's a third year student. She's here. And then of course, Susan Farnand, our supervisor as well. Thank you so much.
Questions?
Can you tell us a little bit about the LED, the differences in that you do for the two shots?
Yes, so these are the current conditions that we are using for our LEDs. So here we have if we could say our blue condition is around 450, 525, and then a 734. And then our quote unquote yellow condition is 472, about like 450, so 548, sorry. 548, and then also 734. But one of the things that's part of ongoing research is we've noticed with that gap right here, around between 600 and 700, there's a bit of missing information, particularly for things that are skin toned. There's like a lack of information there. So we're looking into revising what these conditions are. But these are the conditions that have been used for all previous examples shown.
Was there anything done to optimize this, or you just picked this on the name?
No. So Olivia's work was on looking at the tunable LEDs, and she did a lot of different pairs and matching for this, and she published a paper on how she chose these different ones. So these are the ones that she settled on. And they've worked very well. But in particular, something that I want to mention with this is she picked these based on the sensitivities of multiple cameras. So she looked at how lots of different cameras, she looked at their sensitivities, and then she also looked at the LED lights. And these lighting conditions tended to fit generally the cameras that she looked at. Obviously, if you have a very specific type of sensitivity in a camera, you're going to need to change your LED choices. But generally speaking, I think she looked at like Nikon, Canon, and Sony's, the prosumer cameras, and they work well with them.
Yeah, from my experience of looking at cameras is that Tiffin makes the material that goes on the CFAs. And if you buy from them, you get the same sort of there's a whole bunch of cameras which are almost exactly the same.
Yeah.
But there's some outliers too. Canon makes their own sensors and they have a very different response. You picked two. Why not three?
Excellent question. Yeah. So Olivia also looked into this. One of the big things that became a challenge is actually doing the alignment of the images. When you start to have 3 images, aligning all 3 of them becomes actually it was a bit hard for the software to do and to do it quickly. So that became a challenge as well with also the software. So we had to think practically about, from what I remember from her papers, it was about a practical choice and about speed as well.
What causes the image to move from one to the next?
So the improvement that you get from going from 6 to 3 is not that great. So you have this fall off. So you still get an improvement going to 3, and you get a further improvement going to 12, and then you don't get much improvement after that. But the improvement that you get is much smaller than going from 6 to 9 than it is from 3 to 6. And as Leah said, there were issues in terms of image registration, which is caused just by the difference in the spectral power of the lights. So with the different lights, you get just slightly different image.
Like a magnification due to the different wavelengths?
Yeah.
Right. And so we can align 2, we can align 3, but it takes more time and it's not worth it for the improvement that you get.
And like something you'll see here is we have targets for alignment, because the way that the software engineers were creating, I guess the libraries they were using, I don't know the exact terms, but it really likes letters and contrast and angles. And so you don't always have that with every historic item that you're putting in the scene. So we also have these alignment targets within the scene.
One thing that I think we talked earlier before the discussion here. When you take a picture of the Macbeth Color Checker DC, also that comes with that is all the spectral information for each of those passes, right?
Yes. Yeah. I think that's yes. Because one of the things that I mentioned briefly, and actually I'm going to go back to this slide, is how important your color target is, because everything is really based off of this ground truth that you're imaging. And your target really, because you're doing this estimated reflectance that's coming out of this, your color target really does need to be exemplifying the types of items or materials or colors that you're going to be imaging. So if you're imaging a lot of things that are incredibly blue, having a color target that has a lot of red patches in it isn't exactly useful. You also don't want to overcompensate because you'll get you can get overfitting. So you want to have a diversity in there, but you also really want to make sure you're representing the types of items within your scene.
So roughly can you mention like how many different targets you've actually worked with? I'm sure the DC is super convenient.
Yeah.
But how many other targets have you worked with?
So this particular software has preloaded the Color Checker SG, has Macbeth, and it also has the NGT target from was it Avian Images? Avian Rochester. Avian Rochester. And that one in particular is loaded in because Dave Weibel, who created it, also specifically created color patches in there that represented archival items. So when you're digitizing a lot of documents, because libraries and archives tend to have, quickly have thousands of items because they're pieces of paper. And so representing those different types of browns and greenish colors within there in these low chroma colors in there is incredibly important. So that was another one that we considered and put in there. Additionally, because paintings are these exciting objects and they can be color critical a lot, especially since they tend to be on display. There is also a painting palette, like pigment palette, that is loaded on there as well. Yeah.
Artist paint party.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, 2 questions, comments. Can you go back to your LEDs that you use for the two pictures with the greens?
Oh, supposed to be talking into this. Yeah, I haven't looked at this in like 6-7 years, but I do know that at least when I did the 550 to 700 band, it was hard to find LEDs that were narrow in there.
Yeah.
And when they first did that, I wondered if they just didn't have that as an option. I don't know. So the tunable LEDs that we use for this, they were like a scientific studio type of LEDs. I have not specifically looked into the manufacturing for the narrowband. I know narrowband yellow is still hard to manufacture. when you say yellow, what wavelength is that?
So that's this like past that 550. So you see how it's this rounded.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's like it's a chartreuse. Look to it.
There was another we chosen, but it didn't give as good colorimetric performance for the range of cameras as using this long wavelength red did. But we didn't look at, closely at the spectral performance, and I think using the other red instead of using the same red twice probably wouldn't be helpful in getting the spectral performance better. So that's something we're looking at.
Yeah.
Totally separate question. I never even thought about this till this discussion here. You go to a museum or you look at art or anything, if you illuminate it like head on or at an angle, you have both spectral and you have diffuse. And this doesn't get into trying to separate that out. Has anyone ever tried to do that in terms of trying to document like a painting? How much of the how much of the reflection is spectral and how much of it is diffuse.
Well, I think the BRDF.
I don't know. This is outside of my area of expertise.
Like how much is like a glossy and how much of it is matte?
Yes, exactly.
So Roy did that, in the last years that he was here. He had a student, Brittany, who was working on, adding the gloss information into the image. So it has been done. So it has been researched. I don't know if he's done anything about taking that research and making it practical and available to people, but Roy's still doing active research along with Dave Weibel in their Gray Sky Imaging Company, but I don't know if that's one of the questions he's
I'm curious
about.
what Hollywood is, because I have fiddled around on 3D images that you can develop using software like AutoCAD, 3D, Maya. You can go in there and they have these color things that you can put in how much spectral, how much matte you want. So somehow, you know, they're pulling that information in. It seems like they should be doing that with their cameras too. So because you know they want to make it look as real as possible. So I'm just kind of curious where that's all headed.
So, and I'm certain there are people in motion picture science here at RIT who are looking at questions around that.
So I may have missed it, but the output of Beyond RGB software can be a 3-channel RGB in what color space or?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So the output is as a TIFF file, and it's in Adobe gamut.
Adobe RGB.
But it is an RGB output, but you also get your stack, your 6-channel stack, because
You can output a TIFF file with 6-channel.
yeah.
And can you output a spectral file of any kind?
Yeah.
Pixel by pixel, every spectral?
You can, because we have had a student investigate this, because he was very interested in the spectral information. So you have your cube, your 6-channel like cube as well. If you want a specific area, the software, you can use your color picker, your spectral picker to investigate specific areas and then download as a CSV the information in each of those.
Point by point.
You can point by point, yeah.
But not for every pixel within the image.
I guess if
32 spectral
Yeah.
wavelength output.
I mean, I think if you wanted to, you could, because you do have the cube. And since it is a free open source software, you could modify it for that means. To be honest, I'm not really sure how the practical utilization for like a small cultural heritage institution like that would be, but it's the information is there. So it's not lost anywhere. Yeah.
One example might be you might want to take the same picture and say, gee, this was taken on this illuminant. I'd like to take that illuminant out and add a different illuminant. So you could relight the picture with many different ways and see what kind of tamarism type effects you'd get from it.
Yeah. Actually, I was just having this conversation with another student here about, since you have the estimated reflectance information, relight it under the types of exhibition lighting that you might have. And that could be something that could be really useful. We haven't included it in any like software updates just yet. So we'll see, how many, hoops we want our software engineers to run through. But I think these are things that are like excellent questions, even putting in different types of observers, especially different age groups, because that can also affect like how much you illuminate an item and for how long, because some things are very light sensitive. But like it's also important because, sometimes you have researchers coming in and, they might have slightly diminished eyesight, so they might need a little bit more. So you want to think about maybe tuning your lighting for different groups of people. So these are things that are further questions and I think really useful as well. But we'll see how much we can put on all of our software engineers at the moment. Yeah.
Maybe that's a master's project.
Yeah.
Could I ask you to stop share? And I'd also like
Yes.
to, more questions here. For the folks online, if you'd like to unmute and ask a question, please take an opportunity now. Very good. Then I guess at this point, we'd say, thank you so much for a great presentation, and I appreciate you taking the time putting this